Yeah, he was talking about it last Friday. Yeah, don't worry about winter right now. I know it's probably fall.
In fall or winter.
Yeah,
fall.
be here, yeah.
So, the college rules are so strict. You can't do anything except yours work. So, I'm trying to, like, they don't tell us until April 1st. So, you have to always start selecting classes.
Yeah.
That's always what you want to do. They said select classes just in case you are teaching.
Yeah.
But you don't never know. So, if I was teaching, then I'm I have classes selected. I wouldn't mind just not listening and just taking random classes at the end.
Well, I would be taking it forward right now, and then in worst case scenario, we have to come up with the professors, I guess, if they would just carry on.
Yeah.
Cover the simple ways.
I guess that's the safest way.
Yeah.
I'd rather have more classes.
For sure. Yeah, but, yeah.
Planning for the whole department.
Oh, that's it.
I'm sure they won't have a change.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be books in here.
No, yeah. Since it's 6 o'clock, I have to run over to Rochelle's class.
Okay.
Instruction for a little bit, but I'll be back.
Okay.
We'll see how exactly you said you were.
I did send it out this morning, so.
Yeah, we'll see what they do.
Yeah, I figured that's part of why they want to do it.
Yeah.
This is just us talking about. And then part of why this was at this time was because I didn't remember, like, I thought I was going to do Monday, Wednesday class, and then Tuesday, Thursday. So I kind of put in small paper, but I'm guessing the one was.
Doesn't help me.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad coming in. But the mother just.
This semester he had canceled one of mine already in the semester without the system. Hopefully it rescheduled for April, so we'll have
But yeah, it's I was thinking of it's like, I think it's bad as it could go. It was a win.
That presentation on the flash drive or website somewhere. How were you?
Oh, I don't have, I actually don't
He's not
have.
gonna already do it,
Yeah, that's why, the video can probably just stay full screen.
Okay, yeah, I thought you had a PowerPoint.
Oh, no, I
Well, that's,
don't.
that
Which
works.
actually makes it maybe easier. Because
I think so.
see, one thing that, in all honesty, in my opinion, makes sense is to put divided.
That's what I said. Yeah, I said, well, it's a budget. I said, it would have been nice to have. Yeah.
Is that really? They said it was.
Partition. Well, they have. Well, they fixed that. I remember. So yes. So it's it's not bad here, but like it's so cold.
Yeah, but I can hear whistling and some of that. But
They were nice to have. We have more space now, space for large classrooms. So that's another option for us to do. Sure. So that's a lot of space. Another classroom applications, we have 4 or 5 spaces.
It still seems like this was all through the private study.
It would have been nice for addition, yeah, like, how,
Oh,
So this is a natural area for it.
yeah, that would be nice to have 2 sides, but. Yeah, that was my suggestion, but not like.
It was already awkward enough when we were boxing.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of get it because there's no door.
No.
If they had a door for the middle part, they may have considered it. But you know, they should have considered it over two.
It's not big there. They're large.
Okay.
Like class one, maybe a 4. I said if we would have done here, I know they would be a small word, but I said like partition walls here, so we could open up for a large space or close it down for a small space. Yeah. Yeah, we said downstairs, 3 of them now. Circulator, reference desk, but yeah, it opened up here. But then we have have some extra.
Well, maybe not if you
Yeah.
most places you just check on it.
Yeah. We learned a little bit from
Is it power? Does the power actually work on it?
yeah. This one does for that. There's 2 styles.
Oh, that's what it is. All the books back in. Oh, that was good. Okay, so that. The door, the room is a number on the outside. I had started a whole new way to come because I didn't think this would be good.
So for the presentation.
Yes.
Right stuff.
All right.
I got all myself cookies if you want to.
Thank you. I like wandering. Here's a comment you. You know what? Whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, hello, hello.
You couldn't figure out how to put that in there. They just saw Zoom and so they could Zoom up so that you needed to respond. You got to know that you need help. So. Well,
Unpause it. So right now we're recording.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know we were starting already.
Oh no,
no.
we can trim all this stuff. Take as much time.
Well,
as
yeah.
you
I
like
mean,
to
it can
warm
definitely
up.
be trimmed off, but I feel like.
And then the other thing I want to show you, I wrote a couple notes just on how to share your screen in case you want to show them
I
something.
don't think anything needs to be shared.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you wanted to put a website up there or what.
No, but the only thing is that everyone should be. She must not have audio.
And then I think, yeah, you, so you're the host. You are CTL support from this computer.
Right. I just want to make sure that all the participants were on mute so that feedback wouldn't happen during it. But I don't.
Let's see. Yep, you can do mute all right there.
I don't want me to be muted. Okay, I think we're good because I only learned.
Be real careful.
Oh yeah, well now that I can have this, it should be fine. Like as long as the mic is moving around, but I don't actually know. Let's see.
You can move this however you like.
Oh well, yeah, it probably should be pointed this way then. That's the only thing. All right. Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Like, this is going to end up being more of a podcast than anything else at this rate. But okay.
Pointed right at you.
Okay then. So I'm supposed to do the introduction, everything tonight, I've been told. So if you are here for MMII credit, make sure that you fill out a registration form and leave it at the table. And if you need an extra credit slip, those are at the table as well. And I'm assuming that all of you are here because you already maybe know what MMII is, or you just want the extra credit, one of the two of them. But if you're just here for the extra credit, then I would recommend that you actually sign up for the MMII credit anyway. How many of you have been trying to work on a certificate? All right, one person. Well, that's okay. But so who has never even heard of that before? Okay, so 3 people. So actually, MMII is the Macomb Multicultural and International Initiatives, and if you go to 20 hours worth of events, you can get a cultural competency certificate that you can put on your resume or wherever you want, and it goes on your transcript as well, and you can finish it even after you aren't a student here. You can get one even if you aren't a student here. Anyone can get it, and honestly, I know that it tends to look good on a resume, especially with everything going on in the world today, that you took some time out of your life to learn more about another culture and things around you in the world. And so that's what this program is about. And you can get up to a level 3 certificate now. So every 20 hours, you can get a level up in a certificate. So it's a free program, and that's part of why I'm here, because I actually am very much in support of things like this. So now on to the presentation of what I actually know is an $80 or so book. So this actually is a very difficult book to find, A Russian Childhood by Sofya Kovalevskaya. Actually, in my not so good Russian accent, and very slow because I have not had any Russian lessons in probably like 10 years. But this actually is an interesting book. How many of you did read it? All right, one person. That's okay. Did anyone from the internet read it? Probably not. I can look at your faces and see that it doesn't look like you have read it either. So I came up with some items to talk about regarding the book, but if there's anything that you think of that you want to ask about, feel free. But the book is very interesting because the introduction takes up about 25% of the book. And then her mathematical and scientific contributions take up about the last 25% of the book. So the middle 50% of the book is her personal diary and reflections and things like that. So if you read the introduction, you'll find out that those chapters, no one even is guaranteed that they're in the right order, because 2 of the chapters were actually missing at some point, because when they were translated into English from Russian, some people lost 2 of the chapters originally. So this is actually very interesting because it really sums up this woman's life, that something like this would actually happen to her. So all right, I'm actually formatted my sort of topics I want to talk about sort of in the ups and downs of Sophia's life. So I'm going to tell you something positive and then immediately follow it by something negative that happened. And this will be pretty much the trend of her entire life. So Sophia actually was quoted by a famous historian as being the greatest known woman scientist before the 20th century. And it sort of is true. And the book really, as I mentioned, isn't the majority of it isn't really about her scientific endeavors, but it's more about her life and her thoughts and how those thoughts actually played into her being a mathematician and a scientist. So let's start with the positives. Like she was born, right? I mean, that's a positive thing, because if she wasn't born, then all these great sort of discoveries wouldn't have been made. But that was in 1850. And then when she was 8 years old, her father, who was a general in the Russian Imperial Army at the time, actually retired. And so they went to the family estate, and she had a very good childhood education because she was tutored privately in elementary school mathematics. So, like it seemed like for the time that she lived, that she had a pretty good upbringing, a general's daughter, right? And she could have the homeschooling. But then the bad thing when she was 13, her father put a stop to all mathematics tutoring because, and this was sort of the setting for everything that happened, because he didn't like that she wanted to learn algebra because in his words, he didn't believe in learned women. Now, learned women, like that's an antiquated phrase for so many reasons, and definitely, I also think that part of it might be that I actually believe that the phrase is probably even worse than that, but that's just the way that translated. And we just don't have the words in English to describe what he actually wanted to say. Like, I really don't want any woman to become smarter than me. And I noticed, but he was smart enough to realize she was becoming smarter by learning algebra. So that's the sort of the ironic part. Like, if he wanted to outsmart her, then why didn't he try to learn algebra himself? I mean, that's sort of like, where's that logic going? So that was one of the down points for her. But then on the upside, she continued to learn math on her own. And so one of her neighbors was a physicist. And so if you know, does anyone know the sines and cosines or heard of them maybe? Or like just basically an up and down wave, up and down wave. So what she did was she actually drew little line segments so to approximate the curve. And I think that this is a basic mathematical concept that a lot of people can get, that if you draw enough little line segments together, they can actually even look like a circle and you won't even know it, right? I mean, that's how a computer draws a circle. So they draw a lot of little line segments close together, and then it looks like a circle even though it's really not. So she realized that she could do that, and so the neighbor, the physicist, called her the new Pascal. Does anyone know who Pascal is? All right, well, Pascal, and this is sort of another reason why I like these sort of historical math events, and every semester we have these. But last fall, one of the presentations was about Pascal, and he's an actually interesting guy. And all of these mathematicians tend to have some drama in their life at some point, especially some of these ancient ones, and actually some of the modern ones, even if you've seen any of the famous movies recently, like even recently that are about mathematicians, like A Beautiful Mind or something like that. There's always some drama behind how they became a mathematician. So this doesn't surprise me at all that this happened. So here's a question that I have for all of you, and I would sort of like to hear your responses, and you can either say it really loudly, or I can walk over to you and you can talk into the microphone a little bit more closely. It's up to you. But I'm sort of, after this part of her life, just wondering, is there a time that you can think of that that you were actually good at mathematics? Because if you think about it, right, I mean, the stereotype today is that people aren't necessarily good at mathematics, or they're scared of mathematics. But back then, that wasn't actually the stereotype, because it was actually a positive thing to be good at mathematics, because education was valued a little bit differently at that time, because it wasn't as accessible to everyone. And also, let's see, well, I actually did read an article. It was about 2 days ago that was, and so this issue is still coming up, but about 2 days ago, that said that even the people who say that they have the biggest fear of mathematics still actually have this one time they can remember that they were good at mathematics, and then there was that turning point for them. And so I'm wondering, even if you don't want to address that question specifically, like maybe what you think may have been Sophia's motivation for still wanting to learn mathematics, even though she was being told that her tutor was being taken away from her, and she had to steal an algebra book just to keep on learning. And well, does anyone have any thoughts about that, or want to share about why they think that she may have wanted to continue learning math, or maybe their own experience that might relate to this? All right, go ahead.
There's something really satisfying about solving a half-page long equation. It's hard to explain almost in words, but to me personally, incredibly satisfying. That's what I did math in high school, and obviously I'm a little bit older than a high school student now. Took a long break, and now I'm back in school, and
Yep, yep. And does anyone get that sense that that's actually what was happening with her? Like she was just like in the 1860s, and there wasn't much to do, and so when she started looking at this stuff, she just felt satisfied to do these problems.
Race cars. And there's a lot of mathematics involved in like timing and stuff. And I used to love doing that. You have to watch like the train, the timing, and get the timing down. There's a lot of like little mathematics involved in it. I used to love it.
Oh yeah. I and see that I feel like that gets back to my other point about like Sophia's relationship with her dad, right? I mean, he could have done the math along with her, right, instead of like fighting her about it. And so for you No volume. When did that happen? I hope it didn't happen very long ago. Okay, no. Oh. I hope that wasn't very long ago. See, no one actually. See, you guys aren't even watching them.
Oh, we see what this is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No. No. All right. Well, if you didn't hear anything, then that's okay. All right. Maybe. Yeah. Well, no. Yeah. Well, no. It's not that we don't like you guys. I only actually noticed that anything was wrong because I saw a big flashing 30 chat messages, and I can't actually see the messages. All right. And I actually didn't press any buttons, so I don't know how this got turned off. So it maybe somewhere in the fury of me, like talking about, yeah, probably talking about her and her, yeah, her family. But this is a twisted family, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, I think that she ended up being a very successful woman, but now here's what really happened to her. All right, so does anyone have any other thoughts on that? All right, so even though she did actually go and um, she went and saw what was wrong with her sister and everything, right? And then she went back to Berlin to study for 3 more years, right? She still became miserable, and she still was exhausted, and she still was depressed. And remember, though, that this was a fictitious marriage, but the theory is that all these feelings of depression were because she was away from her husband. Right? So she was actually, yeah, she was actually falling for this guy. And so she was, because remember that even though this was a fake husband, when her sister was in trouble, yeah, he came with her too to the Paris Commune because he actually wrote a letter that said that Sophia and her sister are my kin now too. I'm married to her, and so they are my kin now too. So I have to go. If they are going, I am going, or I will go and save her sister's illegal husband, even if they don't go. So that's why he actually gave the fake passport away, because he really just felt strongly that they were all family at that point, and so she was falling for him. All right. So then she finally did. Oh, by the way, I made a note about this because um, I don't normally do this, but my furnace actually has been out for 2 weeks now, and it actually got repaired this morning. But I was sort of just thinking about life, and I looked up my horoscope, which I never usually do, and it said, you'll need to decide whether it's worth following your heart or doing your duty. It may not be possible to do both. I'm like, this is exactly what happened to this lady, right? She had to decide whether she should do her duty to save her sister or whether she should follow her heart and her hope and her dreams and finish her degree in mathematics. So anyway, this is just very strange timing that this, I don't actually think that the horoscope applies to me, but it applied to her life. So, so sometimes different things like that come up and you're just like, this applies somewhere, but I don't know where. And so eventually she did actually present her 3 papers, as I mentioned earlier, to receive her PhD from the University of Göttingen, and then her topics were on partial differential equations, and then on dynamics of Saturn's rings and elliptical integrals. And so she ended up being the first woman to obtain a doctorate in mathematics from a European university. But then you would think that's all good. She finally achieved her dream. She survived the Paris Commune. But then she returned to Russia, and her husband couldn't get a job due to his radical beliefs. And she couldn't get a job because she was a woman in Russia. So they were back in Russia. They couldn't find jobs. So what do? They tried to build houses because her husband was told that building houses would make them a lot of money. Well, the real estate field turned sour, and then her husband got involved with the oil company, but they ended up having to file for bankruptcy. So I don't think it could get any worse than this for her, right? I mean, because her family was loaded because her father was a retired general from the Russian Imperial Army, but she didn't have any of his money because he still didn't have her blessing, because that's why she was out there on that fake marriage. So she couldn't get that money. And then now they're bankrupt, so it couldn't get much worse for her until 1875, when those feelings I was telling you about actually did come true, and Vladimir and Sofia decided to turn their fictitious marriage into a real one. And she asked him, like, why didn't you want to be in a real marriage before? And he was afraid that if she got pregnant, that would put an end to her studies. And he didn't want her to do that. Like, he wanted to study paleontology. He knew she wanted to study math. So she did that, and he let her go on her own way. And then he also felt like he might be a bad father because he couldn't hold down a job. Right? I mean, he already he was going bankrupt, so he's like, I can't hold down a job. I don't want you to get pregnant and then you can't finish your degree. So what actually happened then? Well, you would think that it's a good thing that they overcame all of that and that they finally got married. But then Sofia decided, well, you wanted me to continue on my work of doing mathematics, but now I'm just going to randomly stop. And she didn't really give any explanation. She just stopped. So there's some theories like overexhaustion, setting unattainable goals, but not taking pleasure in when they actually pan out, or just her own internal fear of success, or just knowing that, even if she did more math, she still wouldn't be allowed to ever teach in Russia. So why should she do more math if she never is going to get her job of being a professor that she really wanted? So, I mean, do you always see from what I've told you about her so far that she might have that fear of success from her upbringing, because she was told, like, you have to, like, steal a book illegal, be illegal in just learning mathematics because I'm not going to pay for your tutor anymore. So when she is successful, she doesn't recognize it. So to me, that says something about her also. So does anyone have any comments on that, or maybe not even on that or how it relates to her story, but maybe other theories on why she may have just all of a sudden walked away from studying math, or maybe in general reasons why you or someone else may have given up something important out of nowhere, and why things like that might happen. So yeah, frustration. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like, and that wasn't even one of the things that I noted. Like, it could just be she was exactly right, frustrated that she couldn't find that job, or it could be frustration at her father, right? Because for all we know, like, she's still in the back of her mind saying, I got married. Why can't my father be happy for my marriage now and my success that I have a PhD? And she's just frustrated at her father still. So are there any other comments? I mean, I still think she's very interesting. So, all right, well, then there's good news then. Like, after she put all of her work on hold, after that, 3 years later, she got a job finally as a theater and science reporter for a newspaper. So she was very excited about that because she got to write about the latest achievements in science and technology. So some of those at the time, remember this is 1878, so some of the things that were just being invented are the flying machine. So she writing about the first people to fly and get off the ground, or she was writing about the typewriting machine. Yeah, and she was writing about the telephone and solar heaters and that type of thing. So but she liked writing about that type of stuff because it was in the realm of science and math and technology, and probably like figuring out how all the gadgets that she was writing about work probably did stimulate her mind while she was told, hey, you can't find a job. But that's interesting that you asked about if she really liked that, because besides being a mathematician, she actually was known as a writer later in life. She wrote like 2 plays and several books, and published like at least 20 journal articles and things like that. So she was a writer also. So that all came up later in life, and even, but she had issues even becoming a writer because she did it while she was in Sweden, but she actually was Russian, but she was writing it in German because she was in Germany for so long. So she was in Sweden writing in German, but she was Russian. So now you can imagine why some of the translations of the book are even hard to figure out sometimes, like what she was trying to say, because going back and forth between that many languages is I'm sure tremendously difficult. Like I can't imagine, because I get confused in my mind going back and forth between 2 languages. So I just I wouldn't want to even think about what's going on in her mind, on top of all the mathematics that she knew and was thinking about. Why are there like 40 messages now? Okay, great. So now, in addition to writing for the newspaper, she actually helped to organize something called the Higher Courses for Women, envisioned by its founders as the nucleus of a women's university. And this is where I say, right? I mean, she was actually volunteering to do this for free, and she was willing to work at the university for free once it got started. And but she was doing this partially for her own good, because she wanted to be a university professor. And if they weren't going to hire her, right, she was just going to start her own school and work at her own school. But they wouldn't even hire her to work at her own school that she helped organize and create, even though she said she would do it for free. And that's what you were talking about earlier, right? That just, well, it doesn't make sense. So let's talk about that for a minute. Like, how do you think that made her feel, or how, from maybe personal experience, does it feel to be passed over for a promotion or something like that that you deserve, and invalidated? So this probably made her feel even more invalidated than she probably already was feeling. So, I mean, so to know like all that she went through, and then she feels even more invalidated. She's already frustrated as can be, and then she can't even teach at her own school. So there's something not quite.
Why even give it yourself?
Yeah, so she keeps on doing more and more for her society, more and more for her homeland of Russia, to try to make things different there. And it doesn't work. And that's what I think, like, I think that you can even think about today, and how it's different today, because social movements spread a little bit more quickly today because of the internet and because of Twitter and Facebook and social media. Social movements just spread quick. I mean, they start spreading more quickly even with the television coming out and things like that. But remember, she was just writing about the telephone, right? And so they were like trying to just be on the cusp of like a social movement, and so they really couldn't organize very well. And even with the telegram and the typewriting machine coming up, there were still problems with that. And part of that's actually part of the story of how her life ended. And we'll get to that later on in a minute also. So there was that down moment in the in her life, but yeah.
She can't put her stamp on it like she wants to. Like he's like the look like a little flower wall. She say like she can't do much, but she knows it's hers.
Right, exactly. Like so now I think you're getting the sense like that I got that this is actually like a very clever woman, right? I mean, she like to do all of this. Like I said, it started with stealing an algebra book, then having a fake marriage. Like she was a very clever woman. Like she actually used everything that she had to her advantage, but she never got to put her stamp on anything. You're exactly right. And so it is like sort of owning a home but never getting to live in it almost. But the good news is that later this year, 1878, she had a daughter. So, after they got that married and they got over her now husband's fear of her getting pregnant, they had a daughter named Fufa. And so here's the strange part. They immediately put her daughter under the care of relatives and friends so that she could go back to work in mathematics. So,
I don't know. I think she's like the fact of not doing what she loved to do. Like when she had the mathematics in her hand, she wanted to completely stop. Now that she's pregnant and had a baby, now she want to do it again. I think she don't want to put herself out there like she want to wait till everything complicated. Then she wants to like, oh, I want to do that.
I know, and that's what I think makes her such an interesting woman, like, hey, because yeah. Yeah. So so that's how she escaped having to take care of the child. Like she left the child with her family and friends. And so, like she saw the child off and on for like 2 years, but it wasn't really again until her daughter is 8 years old until she actually spent real time with her again. So that's just like what is going on with this lady, right? Exactly. That's another point. Like, so maybe because that's all she knew was a little bit of neglect and whatever it might be. So maybe she neglected her daughter because it's like all she knew was from her father. Oh, I got neglected by my father. This is how it's supposed to be. Right. So, you're right. I mean, I just thought that this is just the most bizarre thing that could happen. So, but on the good side for her, she resumed her work in mathematics, right? But then her husband Vladimir left her. So he left her for a position as a docent at Moscow University, but he still kept a local job at an industrial expansion company. So he was commuting back and forth, but he really was away most of the time. Right? So he was away at Moscow University. Her child is with relatives and friends. So she's pretty much all alone. And then, wait, what year was that? 1880. So then it took 3 years until 1883 when Sofya finally said, I've had enough. Your extended absences are too much for me. It's taking a toll on our marriage, the marriage that you weren't even sure you wanted to begin with. And so Vladimir, he started getting really upset at her for making all these comments toward her, and he started having mood swings. And with being faced with the possibility of being prosecuted for a role in a stock swindle, because he got caught up in some shady business with the industrial expansion company, he actually was not very happy when Sofya used this Russian idiom calling him stiller than water and lower than grass. So that's not an idiom that you hear here today, but I mean it's a pretty powerful idiom, and it probably, you know, like if he's already down on his luck, like for possibly being prosecuted part of a stock swindle, and then she's saying, I might want to leave you for good because you're gone too often, this isn't very helpful. And so she actually realized he was getting depressed, but then instead of helping him, she started berating him even more and saying, you're weak of character. I can't believe you have this mental illness that's causing you to be depressed. And so what did he do? He committed suicide. You knew it?
No, no,
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, but this is interesting that after all that she went through, that she was all of a sudden the one berating him, saying like, you're stiller than water and lower than grass. You are weak of character. Why are you depressed? Right? Okay, so here's the even more ironic part about all of this. She actually was berating him, but when she found out that he committed suicide, she tried to commit suicide herself by starving herself to death. And then she collapsed after 5 days. Somebody found her in her room at the dormitories where she was at the university, and then gave her some food, and she survived all of this. All right, so yeah.
like she loved him from a distance, but when he gone, she don't want him to be gone. She want him in her face. And when he in her face, she don't want him. So like she's like, look, she puts her loved ones aside.
But this is the same thing you were describing with the math. When the math was right within her reach, she didn't want it. When the love was right within her reach, she didn't want it. Like all of these good things are coming to her, and then she pushes them away. She pushes an education away. She pushes love away. Right? She's pushing her family away. Like all of the stuff is coming toward her that's good. You think it was just for attention?
I think she want her father to like care about her, because she do all this extra. So tell her father like, oh, my daughter needs help. Maybe I go check on her. I don't know.
Yep, that's what it is. Yeah, and so yeah, he does actually love her the oldest daughter, her sister, a lot more, right? Any other comments about that, or maybe just in general, like if a situation like this happened to you, or can you think of situations like this that have occurred where things could have been different, or what do you think maybe could have been done different here, or do you feel like if we lived in a society, or even if she didn't live in 1800s Russia? Yes, that's what it is. Yeah, and so the things that she didn't like about herself, she projected onto him, and it showed. Right, absolutely. Like I mean, this is just one twist and turn after the other, right? So she just further study. However, this is right after she survived, that's when she secured her position as a private docent at Stockholm University in Sweden. So that was a private docent is where she actually doesn't get pay until after she works there for a year and proves herself, essentially. Yeah, intern almost, right. So she was actually, yeah, she could be paid, yeah, for private tutoring, but not for her actual job of teaching that she had. Which, no, but at that point, her husband is dead, and I'm almost guessing that her money that she got from the newspaper work and all of that kind of helped her out, and that her father actually, um, at this point, I think that her older sister, sending her some of the family money because her father wouldn't give it to her directly. But then there was a whole other issue with that later down the line too. And then finally, the father actually said, "Hey, you do have my blessing to marry this guy." Yeah. Yeah. But even though the job didn't pay very much, she did start a friendship with her new friend, Anne Charlotte Egring Leffler. And so this is the actress and the novelist and the playwright that she partnered with to do a lot of her work in literature and journalism later on in her life. But the bad news, of course, is that meanwhile, while she's doing all of this, like one of her plays actually only played for one night because it got such bad reviews that they actually said, your reviews are so bad, we're never playing your play again, it's canceled. Yes. And then on top of that, they attacked her in the same newspaper for being a woman mathematician. So they really were all over her, like her writing was bad, we don't like that you're a woman mathematician. And all of these things that she liked writing, she liked mathematics, they were attacking her for it. But she still went on anyway. So eventually, she, the very next year, like after her 1 year was up, she was appointed to a 5-year position as an assistant professor. She became the editor of the Academia Mathematica, so the journal, and was one of the first women to work for a scientific journal as an editor, which of course they let her do because of all of the journalism that she had done as part of the newspaper. So that experience actually did pay off for her, even though it was a 2-year stint in Russia because it was the only job that she could get. So that's why sometimes, like, I think any experience that somebody has, if it looks good for a resume or whatever, like she was still one of those women who really just used everything that she could to her advantage. All right, so she was actually on a all-time high again because she got the job as an assistant professor. But then 4 years later, 1 year before she was actually done with that 5-year appointment, she fell in love with a distant relative of her deceased husband, Vladimir. I know this is, it doesn't get any crazier than this because he insisted on marrying her and kept on asking, except that she had to guarantee that she would give up her work and move back to Russia with him and never do mathematics ever again in her life. All right, now remember though, she's still in Sweden. She wanted to live in Russia. but she wanted to do work. So what at this point, like, she has a choice. Does she go back to Russia and live scot-free the rest of her life with this distant relative of her deceased husband? Or does she stay and work one more year and hopefully get reappointed? Because after the 5 years, she was going to be out of a job. And then she would have went back to Russia and wrote for the newspaper again or something, right? So, so she knew that was a possibility, but all right. So this is where it gets even more strange, right? So she was considering like packing up and leaving and going to marry him, moving back to Russia, giving up everything, but she was in the middle of being a part of a math competition in France. So she had already applied to be in the competition. So if she would have actually dropped everything, she would not have actually been able to be in the competition. So she didn't marry him. And then she won the competition. And they actually upped the prize by what was it, like 40%. They upped the prize money to 40% because they liked her submission so much. And that was the largest prize they had ever given out for that award. And it hadn't even been given out the 3 years immediately before she got it at the award because there weren't any good enough submissions. So she, yeah, I know, like this, yeah, this is like, I'm like, this is really crazy that all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, like she made the right decision here, in my opinion, right? I mean, because but she did have a tough decision to make. All right, so. Yeah, that makes sense. So you wouldn't just give it up because of, you never know that he's going to be around forever, right? I mean, he could divorce you, anything can happen. You're exactly right. So you're very good. Crazy though. Macomb, like the potential husband, gave her this ultimatum, but then even when she didn't take it, she still kept on talking to him and he kept on responding back. So they were still talking, and that made things even more awkward because like he gave her this ultimatum, said, if you either marry me and give everything up or not, and then they kept on talking anyway. So then he, while they were talking, tried to convince her that after your last year is up, you're in your 5th year, then you could move closer to me back in Russia, and I'll compromise and let you keep on working. But she couldn't find a job in mathematics in Russia, so she stayed in Sweden. And well, she was appointed to a full professor, which meant that she could have this job as long as she wanted for the rest of her life. This was a lifetime appointment. Yeah, so after all of this, she finally got what she wanted in 1889. And so she was the first woman ever to be appointed to this sort of professorship. And then she was made a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, but they actually had to make a change in the rules even to let her into the Academy of Sciences. But then even when she was in the Russian Academy of Sciences, which meant that you should be guaranteed to be able to teach as a professor in Russia, and they even changed their rules to let her in, they still wouldn't let her teach in Russia. So, what do you guys make of that? That they changed the rules for her, but then still wouldn't let her in to the job that she wanted. So do you think it was just like they gave her the title just
Takes a lot. You can change the rules, but it takes a while to change the actual mindset.
and actually I think that's why I think that I have a lot of respect for her, because she actually put down the groundwork to make things a lot easier for people who want it to actually push later, because the rules were already changed because of her. So if so yes, exactly.
You can teach this, but you can't have it. You can teach this, you can't have it. You're gonna give you a little bit of recognition, but you can't have that at home. But they did explain they no trying to be in Russia, or trying to advertise people. They make sure they get every little thing that they want from her, and they make it hard for her to get in the position where she wants to be, in the position she wants to be. So, I don't know if I said it right.
Oh no, yeah, does everyone agree
But
with
it's
that?
still the old guys that didn't believe women should be learned in the first place.
Yep.
They're still running everything. So that's the problem.
Yeah,
When they start dying off,
and so, but
there's no power.
the good news though is for her that she got the rules changed, and I think that's the thing that was one of her accomplishments, right? So, um, uh, so actually yes, there is one. I forget her name, but she's mentioned in the book that is a woman, mathematician, who actually quoted her as being one of, sort of, in a sense of the way it described, almost like a mentor to her. So, yes, so there are women under her who came along. So,
Came from like the other countries.
yeah, which is interesting that you mentioned that, because um, that first year that she worked in Sweden uh, for free, she actually taught her classes in German, because that's what she knew at the time, because she had spent most of her time in Germany, and then she taught all the rest of the years in Swedish, and you can imagine, like, she didn't know the language very well still, and so she was working with her friend Anne Charlotte on all of these non-mathematical works, her book, two plays, an autobiographical novel, and she actually just verbally told Anne Charlotte a lot of the stuff, and she translated it into Swedish, because Sophia didn't know all the Swedish words yet. So that's another thing, that the fact that she wrote all these memoirs out is amazing, because it was dictated almost to somebody who knew the language better than she did. So now we're
Headed for the big down.
yeah, but I'm going to tell you the good news first.
Okay.
The good news is that she got to go on a New Year's Day vacation, so that her friend Anne Charlotte could finally meet Macomb, the guy that had been her love interest all these years. Her daughter is still long gone. Now, if you thought her daughter was by herself now, just wait. Yeah. So, remember how I said that there was trouble with the technology at that time? So Anne Charlotte never got the telegram about where to meet for the meeting. Yeah, she didn't know where they were supposed to meet, because she never got the telegram. So then Sophia and Maxim, like, sort of just decided to hang out by themselves on New Year's Day, walk around a cemetery of all things. I mean, I found that kind of bizarre, and look at gravestones and think about the past together. And then, because it got so late, Sophia had to go back to um, Sweden in the middle of the night, so that she could get back in time to teach her classes after the new year. But she got stuck in Denmark with no Danish money. So she couldn't actually pay anyone to carry her bag, but it was raining. Imagine it being, in Denmark, it's cold, it's New Year's, it's rainy. So she carried her bag in the rain. The next morning, she woke up and she was extremely sick. But she felt good enough, she felt well enough to go teach her classes anyway. All right, this is where her pneumonia was misdiagnosed as a kidney colic. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, it's not funny, but it is kind of, in a way, ironic after, because it kind of summarizes all of the mishaps of her entire life would be this is just another couldn't something have went right for this lady that she could have been saved from dying of pneumonia, but no, she was misdiagnosed as having a kidney colic. So she finally died in 1891 at the age of 41. Now, if you think about that, though, everything that I've said, can you believe that all of this happened in just 41 years? Right? That's another amazing thing in itself, because a lot of the, mathematicians probably, a lot of the ones that you see as being the famous ones are in their 50s and 60s, and later in life they're doing a lot of their what they consider their better work, but that's because they've been spending years and years and years and years on it. She had a short 41 years to do everything that she did. So she was buried in Sweden, actually. So. Well, I mean, she I know that is the sad part, is that she didn't get buried in Russia, so she never actually even made it back to Russia, even though it was her dream to live in Russia and be a professor of mathematics in Russia. She never even made it back to her home country. So, there were a lot of ups and downs in her life, but there's also a lot of what if comments, and I'll actually. Well, does anyone have any comments before I ask these hypothetical questions? I mean, at this point, I feel like it's kind of sad because she just died, and you have to think, though, what if Sofya would have been born even 100 years later? Right? I mean, that would have been the 1980s rather than the 1880s. Right? Things 100 years isn't really a lot of time if you think about it, but because a lot of things change in a short 100 years. Would she have went the same route of marriage? Would she have even gotten married at all? Would she have had a traditional marriage, an open marriage? And they talk about her possibly being open to a group marriage based on her polygamy. Yeah, it probably wouldn't bother. Yeah, I think for her, she probably wouldn't even bother. Yeah, I think she seems like the one that she would have went straight for her education and figure out the marriage part later. But she only got married because she had to do it to get the education. So, would it have been easier for her to get a job? Would antibiotics have made her death unnecessary? So there's all these questions that you're just left to just ponder. And so the big question for me in the book that stood out is just asking, how would Sofya have addressed the issues of balancing love, freedom, identity, and commitment? Because love, freedom, identity, and commitment were all those things that she had issues with throughout her entire life. Love between her parents and her family and her sister and her husband and their boyfriend later on, her freedom to do whatever she wants, her sense of identity. Was she really meant to be a housewife or meant to be a wife at all? Or was she meant to be a working wife? Or was she meant just to be a mathematician and not even married at all? Like, who was she? And where were her commitments in life? Were they to family, or were they to learning mathematics? So these are all the things that I think um, are difficult, because you don't know. And she only did live 41 years. So that really is a short amount of time. So, well, that's all I was going to say, because I don't feel like there's a lot else to say, given that the you all know that she's gone now, and it would just be like, I mean, I sort of feel like when you hear all these things and it builds up like that, then you sort of are disappointed that she died at such an early age without. And actually, I don't know if they actually heard like the last like 5 minutes of this, because it seemed like it may have been on mute again. I actually did not press the mute button, by the way.